This conference will now be recorded.
As an elected, you assume you're always being recorded.
I know it. I always say something to that regret. Now that we've all said something we regret, let's call this regularly scheduled meeting of the North Star Range Transportation and Air Quality Planning Council to order. It's July 6, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. There's no one here, there is quorum. Therefore, Chair will entertain a motion to accept. Oh, I'm sorry, let's get the right over public comment. Any comment from the public this evening? Comment from the public. Giving you input, you speak. Seeing none, we'll move on to the acceptance of the meeting agenda. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the agenda, so Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion second to approve the agenda. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Hold on just a second. Who made the motion?
I'm sorry.
Second over there somewhere.
Second, no. Second.
Commissioner Stevens, I believe, the main motion, and then the second.
I think it was.
I'll be glad to. I have John.
Who was the second, I'm sorry?
John.
John Bell.
Now that's great. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number two is approval of the minutes. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look over the minutes that have been submitted. Any additions or corrections, please? If there are none, Chair would entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Frank, second by Liz, to approve the minutes as submitted. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, let's open our lead planning agency for air quality agenda under reports. The Air Pollution Control Division report is a handout in your packet. Number four is the Regional Air Quality Council presentation. That is a handout. And in, what is it?
No.
No.
Mike is supposed to be presenting, but I'm not sure if I see him online. Oh, there's him. Here's a.
Mr. Silverstein, hello, sir.
Yes, hello, can you hear me okay?
Thank you.
Yes, well, hello everyone and good evening. I'm Mike Silverstein with the Regional Air Quality Council, and I'm here this evening to present an update to the North Front Range MPO on our activities at the RAC, especially those that are front and center of our work, to let you know of important matters in front of the board at this time. And so I know you have a slide presentation. It's a short one. I, on purpose, learning lessons from previous meetings, kept my presentation brief. And so I'd like to walk through things with you all and, of course, entertain questions and comments. And so the first slide here is our program update. And it's really focusing on our mow down pollution program. That's our incentive programs for residential lawn and garden equipment, local governments, and commercial operators. So mow down pollution residential, we have basically run out of money for the year. We've issued vouchers for the tune of $250,000 to residents in the North Front Range region to go electric with Home Depot and Ace Hardware partners. And so we still have strong interest in the program. We wish we had more funds, but our funds have been exhausted. And so we will be shutting down that program unless there is an infusion of new monies at the last minute. Our mow down local government program is now in its second round, where applicants who were granted up to $50,000 in the first round are now eligible to reapply for additional dollars up to another $50,000, and new applicants can request up to $100,000 for electrification efforts in their local government, whether it's a Parks and Rec department, a school district, just a city or county government, state agencies, transit agencies are all public entities that are eligible to apply for a total of $1.2 million that was granted to the RAC by the legislature. And then our mow down commercial program, it's a brand new program. We've received funding to start up a pilot effort with commercial operators small grants of $3,000 each to start with. And those grant dollars can be increased with additional rounds and also with increased additional funding. So we're beginning to provide private sector operators with up to $3,000 to begin electrifying their equipment as well. So very successful programs, lots of demand out there, and thankfully we're successful in fundraising to begin and continue these efforts. Next slide, please. We now get into our control strategy work, development work at the Regional Air Quality Council. So at tomorrow's RAC board meeting in the morning, the RAC board will be considering regulatory proposals that would impact the future sales and use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. And the two categories are, again, sales, which would begin prohibiting the sale of gas-powered push and handheld equipment within the non-attainment area beginning in 2025. So giving operators and individuals and all a year to prepare, and distributors to begin selling only electric or manual equipment that's non-gas powered beginning in 2025 within the non-attainment area. And then the second aspect of our program proposal is limitations on government and commercial operators' use of gas-powered equipment that's already out there, both the push mowers and the handheld equipment within the non-attainment area during the summer ozone season and the peak season of June through August, beginning in 2025 for governments and 2026 for the commercial operators. Next slide. So this is just a graphic of our latest projections of emissions from the lawn and garden sector in 2026. And as you can see from the numbers here, lawn and garden equipment emit more volatile organic compounds, one of the precursors to summertime ozone pollution, much more than the on-road mobile, all of our vehicles combined that are on our roads and highways. And so it's a very significant source of emissions and a category that's really important to focus on for gaining compliance with ozone standards. Next slide. And so what we want to just clarify, I described what the context of the regulatory proposals are that have worked themselves through stakeholder evaluation over the last 6 months. I want to just really focus on what these regulatory requirements are not. And again, they're proposals to the Regional Air Quality Council. If the council were to adopt them, they would move over to the state for consideration as mandates. And so what we've done, though, is taken stakeholder input and basically say, hey, these restrictions on the sale of gas-powered push and handheld equipment, they're not statewide, but they're proposed for the non-attainment area only. So this isn't a statewide ban or a restriction. It's really a requirement for the area that's out of ozone compliance, and that's our non-attainment area. So the equipment would be available for sale outside the non-attainment area as that equipment's available today. The restriction on the sale of larger gas-powered riding equipment and tractors are not included in this strategy proposal. So it's targeting the smaller handheld and push equipment where there is comparable electric and manual equipment at similar pricing. And so this is the focus. It's the smaller equipment, not the larger equipment. The sales and the seasonal use restrictions are not intended to apply to forest or grassland management, nor do they apply to fire hazard reduction activities, in or near the wildland areas or the wildland urban interface. So that was a strong comment that made a lot of sense. Hey, we're looking at the urban use of lawn and garden, the landscaping for grass and flowers and things in our urban environment, not looking at agriculture or forest management. We're also looking at the seasonal use restrictions not intended to apply to abating or preventing damage during declared emergency. So significant storm cleanup or prevention. These restrictions are not targeted at those activities. The sales and seasonal use restrictions are not intended to apply to equipment used by first responders to provide emergency services. We know that's just not a large emission category, and we would not want to stand in anyone's way of providing emergency services when there is a time of need. And then the restrictions on residential use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment are not included in the emission control strategy proposal. So we're not looking to restrict how residents use their existing equipment. It's, of course, the sales limitations would impact them down the road, but the equipment that they have now, our rules are not targeting that sector, the residential use. It's just the commercial operators and public operators that use that equipment, many hours a day throughout the week that cause the bulk of the emissions. And that might be the last slide. Let's see. Then that's it. So I went through that quickly, but wanted to entertain any questions or comments you all might have.
Questions? John, please.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. My question is does this fall under some state statute or law that's been passed? Or did you say it had to go back to have regulations? Because these are basically restrictions, but shouldn't it be coming through a law? Or is it already under law?
No, these restrictions, the legal analysis has determined that the state has the authority to regulate the use of the equipment or the sales of equipment without further legislative activity. And so there's already authority granted to the state to consider such regulations. But there's no specific legislative mandate.
Does that be granted through some law or executive order? Something, it has to be granted somehow.
It's under the state's general air pollution control regulatory authority. So if there is a need in a non-attainment area, for example, for additional measures that aren't specifically called out by the EPA or state legislatures, the state Clean Air Act, the state equivalent to the federal act, provides broad authority for the commission to consider regulations and emission control proposals that are necessary for the region to come into compliance with standards that they're in violation of.
This questions, Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mike, for the presentation. So a few questions that I have. First of all, when you define, seeing the draft language, when you're defining government or local government, I think that water districts were specifically spelled out, but I was wondering if other special districts are included in that. So library districts or other kinds of special districts, since they're, a local form of government.
Yes, so and that's going to be that'll be a question to get further clarification from the state, whether if they're a public entity, they're deemed to be covered under the regulation that would go into place by the summer of 2025. So basically 2 years from now, that they would be covered. If they're not deemed to be government, then they would be a year later in the kind of commercial operator, a private sector application. So it's not just landscaping companies that are what we would call commercial operators. It would be private golf courses or anyone in the private sector that is using the small equipment. Again, the regulations, none of the regulatory packages cover the larger riding or tractor type equipment. It's the small handheld and push equipment that's covered. But it would be either 25 or the year 26 where those kind of special districts would come need to come into compliance with the rules.
Thank you. And so some of us probably contract out some of this work. The contractors would also be required. Anybody who contracts with a governmental entity would also be required. Is that correct?
Yes, if you're a government and you contract the work out, that contractor is subject to the proposal, if adopted, as if they are the government agency. So the summer of 2025 versus the following year of 26. So a private contractor mowing lawns in the neighborhood, for example, is 2026, or the private golf course. But the public entity or the contractors that are working for the public entity on the public land is subject in 25.
And can those companies also access the dollars that are provided to government, some of the mow down local government dollars?
Yes, absolutely. The incentive programs are really important. And we hope to further increase the amount of money in a big way to help pave the way for best compliance possible. The contractors to government are eligible for the public entity grant program, that $50,000 to $100,000 grant program. Private contractors can apply if government essentially vouches for them. Hey, if a private contractor applies, they would say we work for the city of Fort Collins or Weld County or Lakewood, whoever that might be, and then we would need evidence that yes, that is so. So they are eligible for the public sector monies and also eligible for the private sector monies too as a contractor, because they're probably doing work outside of the public square.
And, I'm sorry, I just have a couple more.
I have several as well.
Okay. Well, maybe some of our overlap. So do you anticipate any additional dollars being provided? Because I imagine that there's some communities that are further ahead in this space than others. So do you envision any other dollars being freed up to be able to help local governments? And especially if we end up talking about special districts, that there are a lot of special districts in Colorado. So, well, even in the non-attainment, I know we're only talking about the non-attainment area, but any additional dollars that you anticipate to help with the costs?
Well, there's in legislation this past year, there's now in place beginning in 2024 a 30% instant discount on all electric equipment from retailers. So if you're shopping at the retail level, whether you're a homeowner or a government, that 30% instant discount is now available for electric purchases of anything, whether it's small equipment or large equipment. We hope to get reauthorization of the state dollars that have gone into the public grant program, but that's always a request to the legislature, and what comes out of the legislature in each session is unknown. So we hope to make similar requests, but for larger dollars for both the commercial incentive programs and the public incentive programs, and also going to other federal and local and state grant opportunities, whether it's through the new enterprises that have been stood up for air pollution control, or through the climate bill from the federal government, the infrastructure bill. We're looking at all avenues of funding, but again, there is nothing that is guaranteed in this business, as you all know as well. So we're hoping that additional monies can be provided for our future incentive programs.
Thank you. And then I guess finally for me, who is enforcing the rules? So who would be enforcing that?
This would become a state regulation if adopted by the Colorado Air Pollution or the Air Quality Control Commission, and it would be a state rule, which would mean the Air Pollution Control Division would be the enforcing authority. It's envisioned that this is not going to be a heavy enforcement initiative. This is really education and outreach. Yes, there will be a standard. Yes, there will be, I think the easiest enforcement area is the sales restrictions. The use restrictions, we're assuming that we're not going to see greater than 50% compliance, at least in the first number of years, because this is going to be a transition for small companies, for government agencies, for everyone. And so we're estimating, based on feedback, that we'll get at most half the people in compliance on any given day in the summer months, because it's really a 3-month use restriction. The rest of the year, it's use whatever you have, whatever you want. But it's really going to be an education and outreach effort where we're going to target our incentive dollars to those that are most in need. We hope that everyone can apply for incentive dollars like they are doing today. And it's really education outreach. We don't envision a ticketing program, a report your neighbor kind of a program if you're a commercial operator doing work in a neighborhood. We hope we can do outreach and education over the next 5 years to gain strong compliance in this area and achieve some of the reductions we're hoping are available to us. And the more time we have at this, and the more money with incentives, and we also know that government agencies, contractors have budgets for future purchases. equipment wears out naturally, and that equipment purchase will need to be electric, or manual, or whatever alternatives to gasoline are out there. And again, it's for the small equipment, which is much more affordable, much more readily available than large tractors and riders, which can be, $5,000 to $10,000 or more per device. We're talking hundreds of dollars for the small equipment.
There you go. I got to tell you, Mr. Silverstein, we have been offline for the last 2 minutes. I am thoroughly impressed with somebody who talks for a living. Is he gone now?
No.
No?
There he is.
Is he there?
Yes, hello?
We didn't hear the last 2 minutes of what you said.
my
We had a computer go down in this room and we just got connected again.
Well, I heard that, board member Stevens's questions. Did I was communicating maybe with her only, or with the room, or your online audience? I'm not sure.
Online heard you. This is Will.
We were reading the subtitles, actually, as you were going through the list.
Commissioner, if you're satisfied.
I'm satisfied. I mean, it sounds like the compliance, it's not gonna be heavy-handed, and that you're not expecting everybody to be in compliance the first few years of the program, which answers my question, so thank you.
Mayor Karspeck, you had a question, please.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm late from a EV issue on my end. So Mr. Silverstein, I didn't catch the whole presentation, but Commissioner Stevens talked to me ahead of time. I think overall it's a great idea. I know some of the hesitations, and I agree regarding enforcement and also chainsaws and stuff like that. I think overall it's a great idea. My only concern is that our neighborhoods are majority special. Well, they're metro districts, which incorporates special districts inside of them. So my worry is those guys use commercial equipment, not stuff from Lowe's. And so really working on that aspect, which like you said, is very expensive, I think would really help them out. Otherwise, that'd be kind of difficult. Thanks. That's it.
Yes, the incentive dollars are for anything electric. So if you're looking to get a riding mower or a tractor, those are eligible. The regulatory programs are targeting the small handheld and push mowers.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, in that case, yeah, I started out 2 years ago with mine, and since then, 3 years ago, since then, all my neighbors have them now. So I think it's any way to incentivize that, it's a great program, but otherwise they kind of make sense on their own, and just due to the lack of maintenance. That's it. Thank you.
I have a comment that I just went on and bought some stock in the Ego electric motor, for lawn mowing. The artificial market is moving to the future. The artificial market is good. It's good. It's time to get in. It might be inside. No, it's public. I made it public.
Mr. Silverstein, I congratulate you on accurately naming these programs. Low down local government, low down commercial, is exactly what we'll do economically. It will completely destroy a sector, and I think it's unconscionable. That being said, I would like to know, you say your low down commercial program pilot is running with first few applications. How many specifically?
Yes, I apologize. The audio on my end is very, very poor. Could you repeat a question if that was directed to me?
Oh, I got a button that I'm not pushing.
Just touch it.
Me of all guys. So I got to touch this. Does that make it better?
Can you hear us, Mike?
Interestingly, technical difficulty popped up now.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes, I can hear Suzette and the chair, but others are difficult.
And I think we're getting a lot of comments online that they can't hear us.
There is an echo. Okay, Mike, I'm going to try to give this a shot. You say in your mow down commercial pilot program, you have your first few applicants. How many is a few?
I think the number is 2. That just opened up a week ago. And so it's a brand new program that we just have received funding for. And so it is just begun with our first two applicants. But we hope that with about $60,000, not a great amount of money, at $3,000 a pop, that we can get others to help us pilot this, where if we achieve additional resources, we can really expand it. But it is a brand new program.
I appreciate the practicality of the RAC when they suggest that in the cases of fire mitigation, first responders, emergency use situations, they're actually allowed to use something that is reliable and will work when they need to. So I appreciate that. In our Youth Conservation Corps that is run through our Department of Human Services and our Workforce Development Program, we have a chainsaw crew. It's coveted for the kids to get on. They enjoy running the chainsaws. They run them all day. They do brush mitigation, they do mitigation along irrigation ditches in effort to conserve water. They can make a chainsaw that they have run all day with a gallon of fuel or so. The electric chainsaws will run 44 minutes. Will these particular programs be exempt from your regulations?
That's a good question. That would if they
That's
are
why I asked.
yeah, that hasn't been raised, so I don't think that has been evaluated in the specific context. I think if it's for fire hazard protection, rangeland management, if it's for ornamental, to maintain your parks department, trees in the park, probably it would be covered. If it's for fire and emergency response, it would be an exempt activity under the rule. The incentive programs, if I could circle back there, also help pay for the infrastructure, infield charging, battery packs, exchangeable batteries. Everyone has to purchase cans of fuel on a regular basis. We help fund the purchase of spare batteries and charging equipment in the field and in the vans and in the shops. And so we hope that incentive program can help with, take care of those issues where, hey, running a chainsaw for hours and hours at a time, can be accomplished with spare batteries.
That would be, geez, I gotta do the math, 44 minutes, 8-hour day. They're gonna need, what, 12 spare batteries? And the infield charging, is that accomplished with a generator? How is that done?
With portable batteries, we have, batteries on carts and wagons that, they're used for home power backups now. And so there's a number of brands out there that can provide charging. The distributors, Steel, Toro, all of them have available products that they're marketing today for landscaping outfits, that are meant for charging in the field or for charging in the shop, where you bring those batteries along with you to change them out. And I think Steel especially has provided us excellent testimony about the torque of chainsaws that are electric that far exceed gas-powered equipment. The longevity of use, where you're using that battery as you press the button, but you're not idling a chainsaw for 30 minutes while you're doing 30 more minutes of work. So there's a lot of advantage to electric that the manufacturers say what the performance is equivalent or better than gas. So it's a philosophical difference and issue that hopefully can be overcome.
It's an economic as one as well, so I appreciate your comments. Any additional comments for Mr. Silverstein?
I have first,
Will, you
I do
still
miss.
have questions?
Yes, just one point, Mr. Silverstein. I know Centerra and RAC has offered this before with the robo mowers, but that might be something you'd like to include into this incentive program as well, like that Boulder company that makes these. I didn't know if that's being included.
Absolutely. Anything electric is included.
Okay, so robotic, great. And my other point is I have an 18-inch bar electric chainsaw. You're not idling it, so unless you're running it, like Mike said, a spare battery is really nothing. It's much lighter than an extra tank of gas. But I do get it with the big Sawyer type, 25-inch, 30-inch bars that you're taking out huge trees with. I don't know if there's anything comparable to those yet, but as far as the regular ones that I'd say most municipalities have and homeowners, they're there. already, at least in my opinion. Thanks. That's it.
We got news buying, and thank God we can pass the cost on to the taxpayer. Okay, thank you, Mr. Silverstein, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
On to number 5, the NFRMPO air quality program updates. That's an in-depth. Okay.
I just wanted to give council an update that conformity work is underway. The document will go out for the 30-day public comment period in mid-July. I'll be submitting that to CDPHE and AQCC staff on the 18th. And then I will present an AQCC with conformity determination there on August 17th. And then we will have the public hearing at the September council meeting on the air quality conformity for the RTP as well as the new TIP. That's it.
Questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's open up the NFRMPO organization agenda. The reports, the report of the chair. 7, executive director reports.
Yes, it says sound quality is not great from the podium, so I'm going to check on people online. Can you hear me okay? Maybe not, nobody's responding.
It is very choppy online, Suzette.
Okay. Well, I will do the best that I can. The first thing I wanted to do was we have a couple of new staff members, and I'd like to introduce Brooke Vitello first. She is online. She is with our mobility program. So, Brooke, I hope you can hear me and understand this so that you can jump on. And maybe there she is. Hey, Brooke. So, Brooke, you want to just say hello to the council and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me as well. My name is Brooke Baitolo. I am from Weld County, but have been working the last 12 years in Larimer County directly with residents. I'm bilingual in Spanish, and I have really focused on improving access to the things that people need to be healthy and happy in their lives. And transportation has been a really big part of that for a long time. So I'm very excited as the mobility planner to help support Ride NoCo and all of our other initiatives. And I'm very excited to meet all of you tonight.
Great, thanks. And then we have another new staff member, and he's in the back. Michael Saunders, he comes to us from the Denver area. He is our new transportation planner. This is week 2, so please be gentle. Mike, did you want to say anything, or just hello?
Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And then the last thing I wanted to let you all know is that finally, now that we're past COVID, the statewide household travel survey should be going out fairly soon. So you should, if you get these or you get questions about these, they are legitimate. These are actual memos that are going out, letters that are going out to households asking them to participate in a household survey. So if you get one, or any of your constituents get one and are calling you saying, what is this? Is this late for real? It is for real. So we don't unfortunately have a timeline exactly when this is going to get released, but just know that that is coming. And that is all I have.
Questions for Suzette? Questions for Suzette, please. Okay. The number 8 is the attack report that is written in your packet, as is the mobility report, which is the number 9, and the community advisory committee report is written in your packet as well. Okay, presentation, number 11, CDOT Transit Town Halls. Brian, I just saw you online. Hello, Jan. How are you, sir?
Great, how are you all?
Good.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us. My name is Jan Rowe. I'm with CDOT's Division of Transit and Rail, where I'm the Assistant Director of Transit Programs. Brian Metzger is online. He is the Assistant Director of Planning and Delivery for DTR. We'll be trying to hand this off, Brian. I hope the audio works. If you just want to introduce yourself real quick, Brian, and your background.
Yeah, hey all. Brian Metzger, as Jan said, my name, Assistant Director of Planning and Delivery for DTR. I've been at CDOT for about 5 years now, and happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to go into a quick presentation, and I just definitely want to open this up for the council's questions and any discussion items you might have for us. We realize you don't have the ability to interface with DTR much in CDOT. You know, other parts of CDOT, the region you do, but we definitely want to give you that voice. So this presentation came about because we had originally planned to do some transit town halls around the state. We had about 4 or 5 planned total with virtual option as well. But we did have to cancel those. As you'll see in our presentation, we have had some turnover. We haven't had a director of our division in a little while, but we're getting to fixing that. So we just offered some individualized meetings with each agency or group of transit agencies as needed. Obviously, the NFRMPO does run mobility services. They do work with local mobility providers as well, and they do support transit in a lot of ways. So we thought it would be a great audience to have this presentation. So next slide, please. Just a quick agenda of what we'd like to go over tonight. Just an overview of who DTR is, what we do, what are our responsibilities within the greater world of CDOT, and then what are resources that are available to you that you can reach out to us for. Brian's going to talk a little bit about planning stuff as well. We've got the busing expansion plan. I'll be covering the Colorado-Wyoming Transit Feasibility Study real quick, and then Brian's going to go into some of our future planning efforts after that. So next slide, please. Just start out with a quick overview of our org chart. Hopefully that's big enough on the screen. Online, it should be a little easier for everybody. Basically, we are organized currently into 5 branches. So passenger rail, I think you all are well aware, that is our CDOT face for the Front Range passenger rail effort. So David Singer is the assistant director there. Brian heads up planning and delivery. This is all our transit planning. In addition, it's also our capital infrastructure projects, which is not only the mobility hubs, but also facilities that we aid transit agencies build around the state. In the middle there is my unit, transit programs. We are responsible for grant management and then required state and FTA oversight for the funds at subrecipients of funds. So basically all rural agencies in the state, most of the small urban agencies interact with us in some way, and even a larger provider of RTD does get some funding through us for certain types of projects. Our bus operations is pretty apparent. That is our bus staying family of services. The assistant director there, Jennifer Phillips, is no longer with CDOT, so that position is currently vacant for the time being, and we'll kind of see what becomes of that. And then assistant director of transit administration over there on the right, that is our programming, that is our finance, that is our budgeting. So everything that kind of holds us together, makes sure we're not awarding money we don't have. Also vacant position there for the assistant director, and we are in final interviews for some more administration specialists to really bolster our staff in that unit. It's much needed. At the top, and I did update this slide for a meeting earlier today, but we did submit these yesterday. We had a new director starting sometime vaguely soon, but we found out last night. It is Paul Desrochers. I believe I'm saying that correctly. He is the business manager for RTD. Long history, he's worked for Smart Commute North, Commuting Solutions, and TDM. He's been in transit planning in RTD for several years, and has recently been their business manager in charge of 4 of their operating areas. So we're really excited to have him on board. Everything I've heard about him is great, steady leader. So that's what we look like now and kind of the areas that we work in. Next slide, I'll hand it over to Brian.
Yeah, so this slide, hopefully everybody can still hear me. Just want to go over quickly kind of where we operate, where our plans are, where our money's at least right now anyways, or where we have everything tied up at, and what we're kind of investing in. So kind of on the left-hand side there, we kind of go over our transit plan or our 10-year plan. That's where most of our funding, especially from a delivery standpoint, from an operations standpoint, lives at the moment. So we got about $121 million in local transit. And so this is everything from expanding services in Crawley County to the bus garage in McKim, Colorado. So this is all of our local agency stuff. This is all working with any transit facilities, whether it's Winter Park building their new transit center, or Cripple Creek, or whoever, all these other folks out there that we have money set aside for them or that they're currently using at the moment. We do have committed nearly another 120 million. That's more kind of in our regional pot of money, right? Where we work with all the Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, Region 4. And really are focusing more on those mobility hubs, right? That you're going to see up and down I-25 in your area, I-70, I-25 South. It's a different area. So that's going to be, again, kind of all your different mobility hubs. Bus purchases, we put money in bus purchases, I think close to $15, $20 million in there over the next 10 years there. A lot with our outrider stops, so we're kicking a lot of that off. Actually just hired a new project manager to help manage that whole program of work, where we're going to bring basically everything up to date, all ADA compliance, making sure we have all of land use contracts in place and just make sure we have all the right stops in the right places and all that kind of good stuff. So a lot of work that needs to go on there, and a lot to go on there. Let's put it that way. Bus stand expansion plan. So we're going to kind of talk about that here in a little bit as well. But to have another $30 million of that. And then the big dollar amount that we have sitting in our 10-year plan right now is that 70 million to really support our BRT routes. That's mainly in Region 1 with all the 4 or 5 different corridors that they have planned for that. But we also have a little bit that goes to the 119 BRT up in Region 4. Next slide.
Thank you. All right. So Brian, that was a great overview of our statewide transit network. Obviously, busing and its family of services heavily supports that. In a lot of areas, our outrider service is kind of the glue that connects these rural transit agencies or areas to the Front Range or straight to Denver directly. But at the same time, DTR is also involved in a lot of other areas. I mentioned we do a lot of grants. Every year we do close to about 300 grants of different sorts. That's planning, administration, operating type grants, mobility management. And they go to all these agencies around the state. We set them up as subrecipients of ours. We assume a lot of the FT at risk that comes with it. So these smaller agencies can come to us, get funding for what they need, and they don't have to deal with all the administrative burden that comes with it. So you'll see a lot of names there. Obviously within North Front Range, you got your fixed route providers, but also a lot of mobility providers. VIA is now expanding as well, further into Weld County, talks with other fixed routes in the area as well. So it's definitely a lot bigger picture than just busing. Obviously that's the most publicly noticeable one, but there's a lot more to it.
If I can slip in a question real quick, I'm just curious on Milligan, is that a VIA mobility thing or?
This is an old map. I actually Googled it after seeing that because I knew somebody would ask that question. That's great questions.
I'm a Johnstown guy, so I'm a little.
Yeah. They do not exist anymore. Corey's not here tonight. I would ask him, but he is. Okay, Corey, do you know if Milligan still exists? I can find anything. I'm all mixed up with the Johnstown.
Councilor Dean is online as well.
Yeah, there we go. Anyway, this is an old map.
Sorry, Jan, was that a question about Milliken?
Yes, if they still exist in some capacity.
Well, they're still there.
They do still exist, and progress is being made on their new vehicle for the senior center.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so a lot of variety of providers as well out there.
Yes.
All right, next slide, please. Brian?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned before, we have a lot of money tied up into our busing family of services, really at the heart of it. We are currently just kind of wrapping up with the passage of Senate Bill 180. I think 2-3 years ago, something like that. We really kind of had that go big with this Bustang's family of services out there. What we did with some of that money is said, okay, let's actually do this expansion plan, but really kind of make sure what we had put out there as far as all the different routes and all the different things that we really want to do with this thing is actually going to work, right? Is that market there for it? Is the people there and all the routes and everything in a really good spot? We're just getting ready to wrap up this expansion plan or the study on it anyways. We're doing final drafts or review of final drafts on this right now. So hopefully by the end of July, we're actually going to have the final version of it out. Definitely can come back and or put that out to everybody and let them take a look at it and see all the different information that's involved with it. I was at your one of your the community advisory committee, I think last month with Ann Rose, and did a bigger presentation on this. So a lot coming out of it as far as leadership and what we're really looking at. But this plan, or at least this first round of this, really focused on I-25 and I-70. We really just kind of wanted to get this focused on first. We'll do more with our intercity and regional plan or our long-range planning and stuff. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But really, the whole idea here was to evaluate the overall market potential. So really, again, kind of see what stops make sense, what times make sense. Do we need to bump something up? Do we need to change something? The original plan was done pre-COVID, and so obviously ridership has changed quite a bit since then. Some focuses are looking to actually change a little bit, where there were some major focuses on I-25 South. The ridership doesn't really look as big there as it does on the north and west lines of I-70. So some really cool information that we're getting out of there. What this plan is also going to do, or what the study is also going to do, is really help us identify what that capital cost is going to be and what those operating costs are going to be. Again, a lot of this stuff was done pre-COVID, before all this inflation, inflation. We've seen driver shortages and all that kind of stuff. So it's really hoping to really kind of dial in some of those costs and what do we need over the next 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years to make this thing really work. And then just those ridership projections. Can we continue to service? Is it beneficial to service certain spots and certain stops across these corridors? So again, get ready to wrap this up. Hopefully, if you were writing it during the month, I think of September, we had a big survey that went out on all the buses you could have taken and different things like that. Kind of wrapping that thing up, and we can definitely get that out to everybody once it's all done.
Questions, Commissioners?
I think Commissioner Brackett, will you go first? I'll go for you. Okay, so my question is, with the plan, at one point we had talked about having doubling the frequency of buses from Fort Collins to Denver. Was that put aside to look at this plan first, or is that in place?
So I believe SB 180 still mandates that. Brian, you might know more about that.
I don't know specifics on that, but this plan will hopefully tell us if we can do that. I guess let's put it that way.
Yeah, we're generally mandated by the Senate bill. So this is kind of figuring out how we're going to get there. Brian mentioned the driver shortage. There's also a fleet shortage. It's hard to get buses. So there are a lot of factors, and I think we wanted to make sure we launch it in the correct way. Obviously, the bill text, I think, we'd have to look into there, see if, we need to double our trips on North and South Line, or could we work out something, obviously Brian said North Line's got a little bit of ridership, so maybe we up frequency a little more than that on the North Line, which at the end of the day, it's a very high frequency for a regional bus service, so it's very impressive. But this is just kind of laying the groundwork, so we make sure we did our due diligence, looked at everything. Our Office of Innovative Mobility, which DTR is under, is actually, I don't know if they started yet, but they're going to be looking at kind of a bus stand electrification study as well. So that's the next step. We currently have a fleet of all diesel buses, so what does that look like down the road? Obviously, once again, that's a feasibility study. I know, certain large providers are doing that around the state as well. And at the end of the day, technology could change by the time they're done with that study. To a different point, or maybe the feasibility just isn't there and isn't something that's worth pursuing at that time. But that's kind of what we're laying the groundwork for. But yeah, we'll have to look into that Senate bill text a little more. So. Commissioner.
Thank you. So I guess my question was similar. So recognizing, my understanding and through the Transportation Commission, we did approve funding to increase service on bus day on North I-25. And so I think it is important to follow through on what we said we were going to deliver, and then we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars on North I-25 improvements and the mobility hubs, and the local communities are investing money in the mobility hubs. So I'm very interested in seeing not if, but how that service is going to come to fruition that has been approved, not only through the legislation, but through subsequent action by the Transportation Commission on the funding, and wanting to make sure that as the segments of North I-25 open, the transit service is there day one for people to ride. So that if they go hand in hand and there's not a lag between when the mobility hub opens or when the express lanes open, it really needs to be done together. So I appreciate all the work, and I also appreciate that you showing the slide on the staffing impacts that you all have had, and I know that's real and that is impactful, but whatever can be done to follow through on the commitments that have been made for North I-25 transit is really critical, because we have to not only say what we're going to do, but do what we said and make sure that that service is there along with the express lanes. So thank you.
Yeah, when that launch day does come soon, I've heard. Brian knows more about that, obviously, on the mobility hub side. But yeah, we definitely want to launch a product that's ready to go, that has that frequency, that's usable for people, really supports the ridership. So totally understand that. So SB 180 had 30 million in it, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at, is how to apply that, and do we need more funding from a certain area. But Brian, I've spoken a lot about the topic that you know way more about, so please chime in.
No, you're hitting the nail on the head. Like I said, that was what this whole idea was, to make sure what we did promise, what we could do, how we could do it, and kind of look at all that money and say, okay, what do we need more of? Initial projections of looking at all this operating funds that we do have, we're going to need more, which I think that goes across the state of everybody. Everybody needs more. So definitely looking into it. And I think this plan, this study will help us really have the data to back up whatever we're going to move forward with. Towards those mobility hubs, I think you were just talking about, we have 3 of them that are really going to open up or plan to open up here sometime in January is what our plan is, I think, along with the I-25 corridor. So we're at Berthoud, Firestone, and Centera. So working with Abra and all the crew up and down I-25 and Region 4 on a weekly basis, trying to make sure our schedules align with that. So actually just started kicking off working with our bus ops to make sure that we have our service plan in place, that our operators know where to go, how to go, how we're going to communicate the opening of all these things. So definitely working across the state, across Region 4 anyways, on all this stuff.
Okay, thank you. I do think the frequency is going to be important as well, because if you're adding stops, right now part of the beauty of Mustang from Northern Colorado is you either get on Fort Collins and Loveland, and the next thing you do is get off Denver Union Station. So if there's going to be more stops along the way, that frequency component is going to be really important. So thank you for coordinating all of that and making sure they move forward together.
Councilor Olson. Hi, Jonathan.
So this Mustang expansion plan, is it only 25 and 70?
Yeah, so just the north-south.
That's all it is, based on 181?
Yeah.
181?
And Brian will get into our future planning efforts, but we're going to do our intercity and regional bus plan as well soon. And I believe that'll look at more outrider routes, interregional routes besides major north-southwest Mustang lines. Is that correct, Brian?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right, because US 34 needs to be thought about, right?
And it is.
The Colfax and the Santa Fe BRTs and everything that you're putting in down in Denver, this would connect more communities and vast more amount of people from Kersey to Estes Park in terms of a BRT or some kind of system that right now that we as a region are putting our funding in to make those connectivities through Link Norco and all the other things too.
Yeah, Link NOCO and, through the planning efforts, all the money in the 10-year plan for CDOT as well for that corridor. So that is one that's, obviously got a lot of attention on it. We definitely want to support it. Where that is right now, I think Greeley is leading a multimodal corridor study. I haven't heard, further information on that, but that was the last I heard of, where that effort was at. The funding is there. Link NOCO Phase 2 will obviously help, drill down a little bit on that information, get us to a certain level, but I don't think we'll have a full service development plan or anything from Phase 2. So we'll see. So probably another step beyond that. Then you have to have a service development plan, you have to have a financial plan, and then we go chase FTA money, state funding, even further for operations. The existing 10-year plan funds, the way I see it, would be definitely more than enough to do all the stop improvements, and really, you could even possibly buy a little fleet if you weren't spending much on that. So there is definitely that launch money there, but there's going to have to be a lot more discussion on where the sustainable funding is going to come from. I don't know how it works, but some you can do, free fare passes through the TMO or something like that to help support it, get money in there. But that is definitely a bigger discussion. It's a high priority corridor. We did a busting outrider expansion study through a consultant about 3 or 4 years ago, and they did do an analysis on US 85 from Eaton to Denver. So that one blew other corridors out of the water. It's technically not busting outriders, so we kind of peeled it off that section, but that's another huge commuter route that I think would be really important.
Which was in the EIS too.
And it was, as the commuter bus option to the east, so absolutely.
Councilor Connor.
Yeah, I'm just curious with the mobility hubs, not having to get off at Loveland to pick up, you can stay on the highway for the added stops. How much longer do you anticipate that route will be now?
Ryan, do we have any data on that yet?
No data on that. Actually, somebody asked that question, I think just last week. No data on that at the moment.
And then my other question.
Sorry, go ahead.
My other question is, with the ozone days, are you doing reduced or free fare?
We are doing free fare on, I think, most outrider routes. And I'm sorry, we don't have a busting person right now. So Brian and I have been covering a lot of other areas of DTR. I know they're doing it on our newly launched route from Lamar to Pueblo, at least through the end of August. But I think there's other ones, right, Brian?
So I believe the busing, and actually I think they were just talking about that yesterday. We're waiting on confirmation from up top to do it on all the Bustang routes through August, but we're still waiting on official confirmation.
So what we did last year is we did half fares for 2 months, where everybody did free fare for 1 month. We don't actually get money from SB 180 and then the amendment this past year, which added money to Zero Fare for Better Air program. So we're not technically a part of that. So we find funding in other places or get approval from above and then reduce our fares that way. But we try to be a part of the program because with people riding it locally for free, then it's going to be a nice, easy step for them to get on and connect to another area. So.
Well, I'm trying to get my husband back riding it. He was riding it pre-COVID, like 2 days a week, and when you dropped schedule, he stopped riding it, and now I need incentives to get him back.
Okay. Yeah, and then good questions about the Bustang corridor as well. All the stops. Obviously, Brian and I are not service planner experts, but I've heard a lot of ideas between the times it's going to take to get down there that we might have certain buses that fill up in Fort Collins or by Loveland, and then they just run closed door all the way to Union Station. Obviously, in my mind, that leaves out connections if you want to go from Loveland to Berthoud or something. We're thinking those won't be so frequent that it might not be an issue. That's a whole service planning thing that we really haven't tackled yet. So we will get there, but yeah, it's some unknowns. Obviously, the center loading ramps are going to be a lot quicker, help a little bit. Running in the express lanes instead of general purpose lanes is going to help, but still don't have a specific service plan on this.
Additional questions?
Do you have more in your presentation?
We do, sorry.
I have other questions, but I thought.
Okay. So we'll get through these last two real quick and definitely get to questions. The Colorado Wyoming Transit Feasibility Study, some of you may have heard of it. It was built kind of from the idea we liked a lot for what was happening with NOCO phase 1. We were like, well, we need something like this for this big line item we have in the CDOT 10-year pipeline of projects, which is a transit connection between somewhere in northern Colorado. I think it was originally named in Wyoming. So first we need to assess the feasibility of this. So first the funding came together. The Cheyenne NPO and YDOT each did 25% of the funding, so half of it was in Wyoming. And then CDOT, DTR, for funding, Region 4 did the 20% match for the type of funding we were using. So really all hands on deck putting in funding for this. The whole goal was to just assess the transit propensity. I'll go straight to that. So look at what the existing ridership is on routes, identify all the major origin and destination points. Where do people live? Where are they working? Where do they go to recreate? Where do they go shopping? And then really what is going to provide the highest level of ridership and the greatest level of success and potential future transit route. And then also the goal was, by setting up this route, hopefully something can be established and then build up ridership for future transit options, whether that's a more robust bus service or maybe rail in the future as well. Next slide, please. So straight to the final recommended alignment that came out of the study. We finished this up in December. It turned out to be kind of what we all expected, a connection straight from the Cheyenne Transfer Station in Cheyenne to the downtown transit center in Fort Collins, based on a variety of factors. Obviously the ridership, the trips going between those two places, the connections to other transit options at the downtown transit center, where you can take Flex, Scooter Express, you can hop on Bustang, anything you need to do there. Also, I was in the study, I've heard a lot of requests from Upper Front Range and North Front Range over the years. We made sure to look at some optional stops as well. So Wellington was thrown into there. Obviously, it's a great community that would love a little more connectivity to Fort Collins without a strong local tax base themselves. There's one also on Mulberry. There are just so many employers along that corridor that we thought that could be a good potential option as well. So obviously it would look like 12 round trips on the weekdays and then 8 round trips on the weekends. So that's just a very high level analysis. We didn't really go into funding, how much would this cost, what type of bus would be best to run this. Should it be a body on chassis little cutaway bus or a large, over the road bus? The coaches we use on Bustang. So very high level. We took that forward, and then we're going to kind of take the data on our side and wrap it into further studies that Brian's going to talk about in the next 5 years. So, Brian?
Yeah, so I'll wrap it up really quick. I think we're running low on time, but anyways, I want to give a quick overview of what we have coming up and some of the bigger things that we're going to take on here over probably the next year and a half, 2 years, something like that. The big thing being our long-range transit plan. So we're going to integrate much better with the whole statewide long-range plan. So working with DTD quite a bit here as of late, trying to kind of get ready to start planning that thing. Really, I think the plan is right now to start kicking that thing off in 2024. That's when we'll see the big statewide engagement and all that kind of good stuff. Some of the other little odds and ends that what's going to fill into all of that are going to be going kind of the same time or a little bit earlier anyways, that intercity and regional bus plan. So we mentioned that a couple different times. That's really where we're going to reach to statewide and look at really everything, right? All of our outrider stops, all the local stops. How does everything really connect into the system? And what do we need to do to make that happen, right? And so that's really kind of the focus there. Already talked about the bus day expansion plan, so that's going to roll up into it as well. And our public transit and human services plans will be part of the long range planning effort, which I believe that's what happened last time. So we'll do all that. That's with all our TPRs and MPOs and things like that, getting those plans in place, or those opportunities out there for everybody. And then as well as the passenger rail plan, I believe that's already going right now. I believe that should be wrapped up here by the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have a date on that. The rail side is running that thing at the moment, but all that's, like I said, it's going to roll up into our long range plan, and hopefully we're going to have a really strong vision and a really strong plan moving forward with DTR.
All right, that's all we had for presentations, so I'll just open it up to any more questions.
So when we asked John and Brian to present, I thought this would also be a good time to let them know what the priorities and interest is in this region, since they're going to be kicking off their planning process before too long. We've got another 6 months somewhere in there. So I think this would be a really good opportunity to also let them know what's important to the council. So taking up that opportunity. And again, thank you for coming and having this presentation specifically tonight. And it's interesting to see and exciting to see all of the other planning initiatives that you have coming forward. And I do think very intentional and extensive community engagement in Northern Colorado is going to be very important. I know the transit town halls probably got a lot more interest than you even imagined up here. So please, as these go forward, keep that in mind and find ways to reach out to not only the agencies, but to the public at large, because I think there is a lot of interest in transit, regional, interregional up here. And then just piggybacking on the comment that was made earlier about 34, the importance of that corridor connecting again all the way from Greeley to Loveland and Windsor on up to Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. I think that what I see is a lot of the more seasonal routes for busing, like snow staying and service to Rocky Mountain National Park, are all coming out of Denver. And I think there's an opportunity going forward to have some of those hubs out of Northern Colorado. So we need our own version of how to get to Rocky Mountain National Park in Northern Colorado, snow staying from Fort Collins to Steamboat. I mean, there's a lot of market here for transit. That's for someone to have to go from Fort Collins to Denver to go to Estes Park by bus. Anyway, so that would be my hope, is that some of those more seasonal types of services could start coming out of Northern Colorado, and I think that would help create a market for the longer term year-round service. So thank you for all you're doing. I know it's challenging.
No, and yeah, just to your first comment there, whenever you have ways that we can reach out to people better, we'd love to hear it. Just this morning, we had our monthly transit monthly meeting. It's basically only transit agencies. And we communicate well with them. We have a great audience, we have good interaction, but we'd really like to expand beyond that. Obviously, transit is becoming a bigger part of the transportation picture, so we want to support that from the CDOT side. So if there are any ways to do that, let us know. As far as bus staying out of Northern Colorado, I know we're working on a Northern Colorado fleet maintenance facility up here just to actually have buses. It's based off the idea of increased frequency on the North Line. But you bring up a very good point that, why don't we have buses serving these routes in other directions? I know when our busting to Estes was launched, I was a big proponent of it going all the way to 34 and then going up to Estes. There were other opportunities, I think up to 36 route already. So, I think we do need to have that look at, who's going where, what recreation options, especially on the seasonal services. I can't speak for our bus ops team right now, but I know our past assistant director, Jennifer Phillips, was very open to all these ideas. You know, in the past I've heard, oh no, we just run our interstate lines and that's it. But you know, sky's the limit. If we can find the funding, if we can put it together, obviously we'd like to run that ourselves too. Busing is a great service. We definitely have goals with busing to make it a service that everybody wants to use. You know, besides just filling in the gap that Greyhound left, we also kind of want that higher level of service where people get ridership and get the clean onboard experience. A lot of different factors like that. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll definitely bring that back, especially to our new director once he gets settled in. So.
Great. Additional comments? Just a general reminder, Jan, and you know, you've seen the state democracy presentation, Will County fastest growing county in the nation. Not, sorry, the state, fourth fastest growing in the nation. And we will double in size by 2050. And so that's something to keep in mind as I let you around small here. Secondly, staffing problems at DTR are real. Can we take, say, $500,000 to get you all dental? Or, I mean, what do we need to do to help you out? Because I'm not saying that you don't have great dental, sir, but
we got to save a lot of that somehow.
Striking this aside, I'm curious as to, I mean, why is there such a gap right now at DTR, and what does CDOT do to prioritize that?
Yeah, so DTR is still a fairly new division within CDOT. It used to live within our Division of Transportation Development, Statewide Planning, and we basically only administered pass-through FTA funds to agencies. And in 2009, legislature created the Division of Transit and Rail, and we've been building from there. For many years, it was kind of a quieter division. There was a director, there was a couple planners, very small. As you've seen, we've grown a lot. We brought in a director a couple years ago who's really good at change management and directing those kind of things. We needed a restructure with all this new funding coming in, all these new responsibilities, all these new programs we're expected to deliver. It's caused a bit of growth. And with that comes a little bit of maybe differences. And, you know, we definitely lost some staff that, you know, maybe didn't want to keep up with the changes. We're used to a little different culture. So that's part of it. Other than that, it's just continuing to grow and expand, and there's definitely a lot of work. I think that's definitely part of it. So they do not, you know, stop sending us stuff, but transit's a busy area right now, and I think we're doing well. To be honest, it does maybe look bad, you know, be open about it. There are some vacancies, but honestly, Brian will concur with me probably that we are headed to a very good place. We definitely, Brian and I have been in DTR about a year and 2 months at this point. We both came kind of from the highway side, so a lot of transit stuff to learn, and that's where a lot of our staff are at. They know FHWA regulations, those kind of things, but learning FTA, it's a whole new bag of tricks. Some things are similar, but there are a lot of much stricter requirements. You know, our transit administration assistant director, she came in and, you know, tons of experience, but, you know, this is a completely different world. So, you know, I can't really speak to why each individual person left, but I can tell you that we are definitely headed in a good place now. The incoming director, I've heard nothing but great things from his future boss. Yeah, we're really excited to just keep growing, and we've got our feet under us. Obviously, there's been some issues with, you know, contracting timelines for grants that are required for the calendar year.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question.
Just keep spitballing.
We're bringing up all the dirt. No, and so obviously that's one of those processes that we didn't have cleaned up. We didn't really know how to handle it. We have a few staff that have been in the DTR for several years that kind of know things, but now we're really going back to that. We've got policies in place. We've got a full schedule for this year. All of our contracting should be done hopefully by December 1st, but definitely by the end of December. Especially, you know, operating type contracts will be done by November, hopefully. So everything's been very moved up, much more scheduled. I came from different parts of CDOT, you know, that ran very well greased. So, you know, that's just kind of what we're trying to bring into DTR.
But my comments are not going to be critical of your work. I appreciate the job that you all do, that's for sure. You are busy, and a guy who's generally skeptical of, not skeptical, but cautious about these kind of programs. I'm a big fan of Mustang, and the more that we can do to empower you, the better, in my opinion. So, thank you. Quick question, please.
I'm a big fan too, of Mustang. Is there any relief on the driver's side or shortage, right? Is it getting any better?
It's
we're at all these buses, and each bus needs a driver.
We pay, I think, the best in the state. We pay definitely as much as RTD pays. But I mean, you can talk to any transit manager in the country, and it's still really difficult. The amount of liability, or, you know, the amount of stress that comes with driving a coach. That pay right now, doesn't really compare well to other jobs. So it's also hard to attract new talent besides just the existing talent. There have been numerous programs to, I wouldn't say speed up, but to make the CDL testing process a little more efficient. That was part of some recent state legislation where the certification centers and testing centers are allowed to be a little more spread out. More rural areas can do it there locally. So there have definitely been programs to try to help with that. There's been, signing bonuses, I think, on some areas, but it is definitely a difficult area, and that combined with the vehicle shortage, buses, et cetera, it's really difficult. And then compounding that is a lot of agencies are starting to transition into electric fleets or something, and that supply chain is, even more delayed. So it's a lot of compounding factors, but the driver shortage, we don't really see any positive signs coming up in the near future. So I think what we're trying to do is just find some solutions.
Check. Thanks. I heard inkling that CDOT might swap out some TAP funds for some ARPA dollars to help us meet some of those contract deadlines. Do you know whether that's still a possibility or not?
I cannot speak to that. I do know that the ARPA funds are no longer trying to be rescinded and brought back to the federal level. Even FTA was discussing that with us. But Brian, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've heard that one. That's a good to me.
Any more grilling? How many questions for you?
I do wonder.
Please.
Quickly. And again, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing and the team is doing and going through that transformational change is hard, organizational change is hard, and you coming here and being here listening and sharing just, actually what's happening and all the hard work you're doing to try to remedy that is very well appreciated. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Radke.
Thank you, sir. Okay, thanks, Jan, Brian, appreciate you. Move on to action items. Number 12 is the fiscally constrained plan, which is on page 16 of your packet. Hannah Rose, please.
Thank you. Last month, I brought the draft of the fiscally constrained plan to the Planning Council, and so I wanted to bring that back this month to discuss again and address some of the questions that had been brought up last month as well. So as a reminder, the fiscally constrained plan is part of the 2050 RTP, and it's federally required to cover the cost of operating and maintaining our transportation system over the life of the plan, and includes all reasonably anticipated revenue, public and private. And all of the funding estimates that have been provided are in the year of expenditure. So one of the things that we had talked about last month was the operations and maintenance assumptions. And so we discussed this again with our TAC at our last meeting, and the per lane mile cost estimate that we have provided has been updated since last month. So based on the average of the information that we had received from our local agencies, we came out to the combined operations and maintenance costs of $25,138 per lane mile. And so what that includes for operations is the lighting, traffic control, snow and ice removal, and then for roadway maintenance, it's including the resurfacing costs. One of the things that we had talked about last month was what that level of condition is that we're looking at when we talk about making sure that our system is maintained and operated through the life of this plan. And what this assumption includes is to, at the minimum, maintain our current level. So that was one of the things that we also discussed with TAC at our last meeting, was if it makes sense to include in our kind of unmet need what it would take for us to get to a target condition or to a fully excellent condition of operations and maintenance. And at this point have determined that we won't include that assumption in this plan. That could be something that we look at in a future plan, but given our timeline of needing this plan to be adopted, that kind of work, we don't have the kind of data to be able to get that information, but making sure that we're clear in our plan as far as what this that line item consists of, that it's at the minimum of maintaining our current condition. A couple of the other things that we had talked about last month that I wanted to bring up again was the Front Range passenger rail estimate that we had included in the unmet need for our regional transit. We talked with Front Range Passenger Rail and had determined that at this point, because there's a lot of uncertainty with that dollar amount for Front Range Passenger Rail at this time, that we wouldn't include that dollar amount in the fiscally constrained plan. Front Range Passenger Rail will still be considered in the unconstrained plan projects. It's still one of our regional transit corridors, but just with the uncertainty of that dollar amount, haven't included that in the fiscally constrained plan at this time. And so what we had discussed at the last Planning Council meeting was where our priorities are as far as if additional funding becomes available, where that funding should go. So the two pieces that came out of that from that discussion was that roadway operations and maintenance is definitely a high priority, but then also looking at completing those regionally significant corridor capacity projects. At our last Planning Council meeting, we had presented the list of planned projects. We have the projects that are constrained, so we reasonably anticipate the funding to be available for those projects, and those are all considered constrained within the fiscally constrained plan. But then we also have the list of unconstrained planned projects. So if additional funding becomes available, those are the types of projects that would be able to be funded with additional funding to the region. So I do have the few slides here of the revenues and our expenditures. So looking at the lifetime of the plan, we have about $13.3 billion, with most of that funding, the majority of it, coming from our local agencies. And as you can see with the table that I have here, a lot of the funding that we do have is flexible, so it can be assigned to a variety of different projects. So it can go to operations and maintenance, or the capacity projects, building out our regionally significant corridors.
Can we explain the flexible category there? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so most of the funding, it is not dedicated to a specific type of project. So for things like FTA funds, those are going to be very specifically have to go to transit projects. There's some of the funding, state and federal, that is specifically dedicated towards operations and maintenance, bridge structures, things like that. The funding has to go to those projects. So anything that doesn't have those very specific requirements of what that funding has to go to is included in flexible. So that means it can go to any one of those categories there. And so when we look at, let me bring up the other slide. When we look at our different expenditure categories, things like the transit funding is going to go very first to the transit projects. Anything left over that we have as far as expenses can be fulfilled with that flexible funding. And so a lot of that flexible funding for the local governments is going to be like the sales tax, use tax, things like that. So the cost estimates that I have provided here have been updated from the council meeting last month due to some of the updated modeling that we had completed in the last month. And so what that brings us out to is the cost of the expenditures of this plan is about $15.5 billion. So that leaves about $2.3 billion of that unmet need, which is mainly the regionally significant corridor capacity projects and the non-regionally significant corridor capacity projects that have been provided from our TAP and our local governments. So I wanted to open it up for any questions about the fiscally constrained plan.
Questions, Brandon Rose, please.
So in reading through the narrative, not the slides, there was something that said, so revenues were apportioned to the North Front Range based on two factors that were weighted equally, was lane miles and VMT. And so based on these factors, 61% of Larimer County's transportation revenue and 24% of Weld's was considered reasonably anticipated to be available to the North Front Range. Can you just explain that piece a little bit? That was a little confusing to me. So is less, a smaller percentage available from Weld County because there are more lane miles, because there's more BMT? Is it, how does that work exactly?
Right, and so those were the budgets for the counties, looking at those budgets and splitting, because we are only serving portions of the counties, looked at the VMT, like within our area, so we can, and the lane miles within the North Front Range boundary, so that we can assume a certain amount of the funding that Larimer County has and what portion of that is going just towards the lane miles within our region.
That makes sense. Thank you for explaining that.
Yes, John.
I might have been drunk or sleeping, but
Yes.
maybe all above. I think it was at the Evans meeting when we had the discussion of where we wanted to put our priorities. I think it was at the Evans meeting, wasn't it?
So at the meeting in Evans, we had the discussion of priorities for the call for projects.
Yeah,
Yes.
but when did we talk about, I thought we all agreed that the capacity was going to be any additional flexible funding. I'm not disagreeing with roadway and operations and maintenance, but I thought we all said, we all leaned towards capacity.
Yes. And so then also given the rest of the discussion about operations and maintenance, wanted to include that consideration in there as well.
Yeah, go back to the chart. Go back to where the funding is. So the flexible funding, we put $4 billion, I think that's $4 billion, right? And $4.182 billion into roadway operations and maintenance, and we only dropped $1.4 billion into capacity projects.
Yes, so
we could have fully funded our capacity projects, but we chose to fully fund the roadway and operations and maintenance.
So when we were with that discussion, what we first wanted to do, what we had allocated was first operating and maintaining our system, and that's one of the requirements of the fiscally constrained plan is to ensure that we have the funding to be able to maintain our current system. So what we had done first was go through and allocate any of the funding that we had down this list. And with any of the remaining flexible funds that we had available, that was what the question was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to remember.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily fully funding all the capacity projects and then going back through. It's with anything that was left over after funding.
Which is the 1.3.
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments, please? The request of our county staff is to review and approve this 2050 RTP fiscally constrained plan table. This is just, remind me again, first two parts.
So this is not a resolution, it is just taking action. The actual resolution will come when you adopt the regional transportation plan.
Concurrence.
Good work.
So and then my last, can I ask another question, Mr. Chair? So, and you did say in your presentation that any additional funds could go towards, since we're fully funded in roadway and operation and maintenance, any extra dollars, because this is reasonably anticipated funding. This is not if we get a grant or if we get something else, it's got to go in here, so that'll go up. Or we get a P3, or we get something that goes up. That could go to backfill our 1.4 billion.
Right. And so within the RTP, we will have the fiscally unconstrained plan projects. So those would be projects that are eligible for funding. They are still included in the RTP.
Thank you.
Additional questions? If not, the chair would entertain a motion simply to approve the 2015 RTP fiscally constrained plan table.
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Meyer, second by Commissioner Conoco. Councilor Conoco, rather, to approve. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Culture Commissioner, maybe you and Kristen can swap tomorrow. And you and I.
Is that a promotion or a demotion?
I don't know. I would swap the wheel right now. You look like we're I know you would. Okay. Action item number 13 is the North Front Range NFRMPO greenhouse gas transportation report. There we go. Next line, report. Becky, please.
Thank you. So as was mentioned at the council meeting last month, the GHG transportation report for the 2050 RTP has been developed using similar assumptions and strategies as were used for the 2045 RTP's 2022 update that we did last summer. And so we used the same set of strategies. So those were transit, TDM, or transit demand management, operations, and active transportation. And so that is Alex pulling that up just to show everyone what those sets of strategies are that we used for this report. So the baseline plan remains the 2045 RTP that was adopted in 2019. And using this same set of strategies, our new plan and new model, we have met or exceed the required GHG reductions for all of the years that we need to meet those reductions in. So we need to put this out, this transportation report out for a 30-day public comment period. And so pending approval by council tonight or adoption, we will put it out tomorrow, July 7th through August 6th. And then any comments received during that period will be incorporated as applicable. And then following this approval and adoption of this report, will be sent to CDOT and to CDPHE for their review. Prior to the Transportation Commission meeting that we will present this at on August 16th, and their approval will come on the next day, August 17th. This also will be going to the IACT, and I'm blanking on what that acronym stands for at this moment, so I apologize. That meeting is next Friday, so we'll be asking for their concurrence on this GHG transportation report that covers both the 2050 RTP and our new TIP that will be coming to you from Anna Rose next month for discussion. This was an action item at the TAC meeting last month, and they recommended Planning Council adoption of the NPO GHG transportation report pending no negative public comment, and the resolution is also in your packet as well. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Question, please. Resolution 2023-12 on page 23 of your packet. So the North Fort Range Transportation Air Quality Planning Council adopting the NFRMPO greenhouse gas transportation reports. Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Counselor. Want a job? Counselor Olson. A second by Mayor Karspeth to approve. Further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Becky. Okay, number 14 is the 2023 Call for Projects Guidebook. And Rose, please.
Thank you. Over the last few months, we've brought different items for the 2023 Call for Projects that we'll be holding. So I wanted to give an overview of the Call for Projects tonight. The draft guidebook was sent as a link in the handouts. So I'll be going over some of the highlights from the guidebook. So I wanted to highlight some of the key dates for the 2023 Call for Projects. We are once again discussing it tonight, and we'll be looking for action from the Planning Council at the meeting next month for us to open the call on August 4th. The applications from our local agencies will be due on October 6th. We will have a scoring committee meeting in November. We will present the applications to Planning Council at the December meeting, and then look for final approval of the awards at the January council meeting. So as a review, the funding that we have available is for 4 funding programs that are the federal funding programs, and it's looking at about $22.7 million that we'll be awarding. We will have an additional amount of funding being rolled into this call that was left over from the previous calls. And so now that we've started the beginning of the state fiscal year, we will be able to bring that final estimate next month for what exactly that looks like for all of those funding programs. So it'll be a little bit higher than what the tables I have here is. At the council meeting in May, the Planning Council agreed to fund a TMO incubator set aside, which is $100,000 per year starting in fiscal year 2024. And so that will be taken out of the carbon reduction program funds. We have also talked about the eligible applicants for this COPPA project, so it will be the NFRMPO member agencies, so cities, towns, counties, and then also our partner agencies are eligible to apply through the competitive process, so that would be CDOT and the RAC. Some of the things that are outlined in the guidebook are the requirements for all of our funding programs, and so as we've discussed at a few of the other council meetings, is looking at aligning the COPPA projects with the goals that have been adopted for the 2050 RTP. We also wanted to integrate better the congestion management process, so for eligible project types, we will require an SOV analysis worksheet and looking at the different strategies that came out of the congestion management process and integration of those strategies into the projects that are being applied for. Additionally, as we have done with the last few calls for projects, we will require our applicants to submit an equity and a performance measure impact worksheet to help us be able to track the impact of our projects in our different plans, such as the TIP. So this table here is looking at the different limits for the federal funding programs. So for the CMAQ funding, we have said that it is 50% of the available funding can go to any agency. So that's about $5.5 million for the TA funding program and the carbon reduction program. 100% of the available funding can go to any agency. For the STDG program, we have a population-based calculation that is made, which is this table here. And so each of the agencies are listed, and the maximum amount that any agency can apply for is in that last column, the maximum federal request. Prior to the 2021 COPPA projects, we went through discussions with our planning council to ensure that all of our local agencies were eligible to apply for, at a minimum, $1 million. And so we have carried that policy forward through here. So the maximum federal request for all agencies is over $1 million.
Can we go back?
Yes.
So when I look at the maximum federal request, and you come to Greeley and Loveland, we're below a lot of the folks in the small. Why is that?
Yes, so how the calculations are made for the STBG program is for small communities, it is the population-based dollar amount that you see in that column is population-based, and then also the small community set-aside. So they can apply for up to those two line items added together. And then for Greeley, for Collins and Loveland, the large communities, it's the population-based plus an additional 30%. So that is how the math has worked out. And this isn't a guarantee of that award, that's just the maximum that each agency is able to apply for.
And I think the other thing to note is that this is not set in stone, these are just targets. So for example, if the large communities have a lot of applications, the small communities have very few and they don't use the money, it's not like saying you have to hold that money for the small communities. Like I said, it's just a target, it's not saying we have to hold it there and it flexed over to the large communities.
And did we develop this? Did the Norfolk Range develop this, or is this a federal mandate? Is this the Norfolk Range?
Yes.
Norfolk Range, yes.
And it's the same calculations that we've used for the last few calls for projects.
And I think this started because small communities were having a tougher time competing on STBG projects. There was also a desire to have a lot of surface treatment in small communities, which was not competing well, I guess, and that's why this was developed.
I think I remember that discussion a long time ago. I just wasn't on the Greeley City Council at that time. So now I'm a little concerned. I'm okay with Windsor and Severance getting more than Greeley. Not getting more, that's your maximum, that's the thing and I'm a firm believer in regional projects. I've always been when I was at CDOT and everything, but I guess I don't understand the maximum federal request. I mean, if we have a project that needs $2 million, right, we can't apply for that $2 million need. We only can apply for 1.798 of that need. But if all the money's not used, you're saying that can be applied for the projects that are asking for more, the unfunded portion of it, whatever. Okay. I have to get my head wrapped around this.
I would say if you have a large project, you may want to think about partners, especially small.
We did that once and everybody got mad at us from other communities. We're stealing hot water with someone.
One of
Look at that.
The other piece that isn't on this screen here is because we have specified that CDOT and the RAC, the partner agencies are eligible to apply for funds. We've specified that maximum for applying would be $1 million. So not based on population, just based on that set $1 million maximum.
They'll be okay with it, I'll just keep going. I just have to get my head covered. That's okay.
All right, so just wanted to quickly review again the scoring criteria. These are the goals that we had outlined for the 2050 RTP that we had aligned our scoring criteria with. And so had brought this to the Planning Council last month and wanted to just bring it up again. If there are any of the goal areas that you wanted to look at further, we can do that. Otherwise, this allocation had been discussed with a TAC workshop and then the TAC meeting over the last couple months to kind of finalize how these calculations will be made for all of these scoring criteria.
It just feels like multimodal is becoming a larger emphasis. So could you please talk a little bit about why that score's so low?
Yes, so it was partially based on the breakdown of the priorities that Planning Council had gone through that process of prioritizing the goals, and within each of the goal areas had also prioritized the different types of things that would help create those calculations. And so that was one of the ones that had came out a little bit lower was that multimodal. But some of the ways that we're calculating things like the mobility can also help with increase with the multimodal aspects of these projects as well. For something like the TA program, how we have no points going to that, that's specifically because those are going to be multimodal projects already.
Curious, Ann Rose, regional health, 60% on the CMAC that's my CRP programs. Delineators of regional health, how is that assessed? And furthermore, how is it delivered?
Yes, so the regional health one, that is where the air quality emissions reductions come through. And so most of the points under regional health within CMAC and CRP are for those emission reductions.
So it can be objectively quantified, is what I'm saying, that's
yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's our air quality and greenhouse gas.
Yes.
Those that we put in place over a couple years ago.
Yes, so it's calculated based on the emissions reductions over the life of the plan and using the tools from the state of Colorado and from FHWA to calculate those emissions reductions.
Thank you. Please, Commissioner.
Yeah, I have a question around equity or vulnerable communities, disproportionate impacted communities. Does that fall under regional health as well?
Yes, it does. And that the equity index that I had provided the Planning Council back in April will use those areas within our region to calculate that proximity.
Perfect, thank you.
Additional questions, shareholders? You have another slide.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Just next steps. So as I mentioned, we'll bring this back for action for planning council at the August meeting.
Questions? See you in August.
Thank you.
Number 15 is the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan RTP draft. Alex Wilson.
He's trying.
He's trying.
He's trying.
What did you shave last this morning? Just curious. Just one of those guys.
Last week.
That's bad.
You need to drive? I think I did it. The designated driver.
So yet again, I get to have the fun when Anna Rose and Becky have already gone through a lot of the difficult pieces of this. So starting next week, we will have a draft 2050 Regional Transportation Plan out for public comment. We are finishing it up this week. So we're finishing the modeling and writing up the report, so that way we can put it out for public comment. We will make sure that council receives that notice once it is ready as well. And so we took these two charts to TAC, and the big thing was just there are certain things that require, or that we feel TAC should provide more comment on and should prioritize their time, just to make sure that communities are well represented, that the intention is well represented. So some of the things like the planning context, that's just something that we've been talking about for a while. The 10-year list of projects, another thing that's been talked about ad nauseum. So don't need to get as much feedback on that piece. But there are other pieces like the scenarios, the fiscally constrained plan, and the planned projects that we want to make sure what we heard from the community, what we've heard from planning council is incorporated correctly. And so that's where we really want to prioritize TAC's time. And then there's some other things that TAC has maybe seen in different pieces, but we want to make sure that it makes sense, and that's what the median TAC priority is. But the general timeline that we have shown in in table 2 on the bottom, we were optimistic that we would have a draft RTP out by the end of June, but now beginning of July. But Becky went over the conformity process, greenhouse gas transportation report process, and then we'll be bringing the full plan to council starting next month. Final approval hopefully in September, and then we will submit that to FHWA or to CDOT and then to FHWA FTA for approval. So there's a finish line in sight. Really appreciate all your patience and guidance through this process. But we really just wanted to give you a heads up that we are in that final leg of the race, and we will have documents and final products ready for review very soon.
Questions or comments, please, go.
So I have a question, like, we've been through some of these sections over the last 4 months, 5 months, pretty in-depth.
Yes.
Some of them we have not even touched on. So like social economic trends, initiatives in technology and system performance reports and performance measures. I mean, safety and resiliency, I mean, we talked a little bit about safety. We had a presentation where we're safe and there's no congestion. So we're good, so we don't need to worry about it anymore. But are we going to touch on those at all, or is that going to be something that our staff should read, that should report to us?
So both. We'll ask for that feedback from TAC. We'll get the public comment notice as well, and then we can go through those sections with planning council next month when we talk through the discussion, and then if there's any changes.
You know, reading that, I'm going to need something to keep me awake.
We're trying to put pictures in there. And we're making it colorful.
Good.
But we're trying to, it's bright colors and there. Yeah. But no, we want to make sure that everything that's in this plan makes sense and council and TAC members can stand behind. So definitely want to make sure that we're good.
You just want to let's take back and make sure that we have the right conversations.
That makes sense.
Because that's a lot of hard work you guys put into that.
Yeah, we're pretty happy with where it is right now, and we'll be happy with when it's done.
Additional comments?
Thanks. I have a question on the safety and resiliency section. And I know we talked about safety, last month or one before, but I have a question on the resiliency. How is that being addressed in the plan? Is it resilience in terms of the infrastructure or?
Anna Rose is the one who wrote that section, so I was just looking at her.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is because there is now more of an emphasis, in terms of US DOT on resilience, not only infrastructure resilience, but evacuation routes, emergency preparedness, and things like that, I don't think have typically addressed as much in our regional transportation plans in the past, but are becoming more and more important in terms of the issues that we're facing. So I'm curious if the plan is addressing the breadth of resilience, or how are you incorporating that?
Yes, so part of the piece of the resiliency is providing information about the work that is being done in the region already. And so looking at specifically the work that the counties do on the resiliency piece, but we also touch on the different opportunities and looking at some of the work that CDOT has done with like criticality routes and things like that. But a main part of the resiliency piece that we have in here is kind of just providing that information and looking at some of the different hazards that we have. I know one of the things that had been brought up recently is like looking at the Protect grant. And so that is something that we've discussed internally, but kind of looking at that level of detail, that's not what this plan goes into. It's really just more informational overview of it.
Okay, and yeah, the Protect grant is what really flagged that for me, and just wondering if this plan would at least be a place to create a seed of possibility, so that in the future, the region might consider going after those types of federal grants to look at emergency types of evacuation routes, or again, all of those things that are really coming more to the forefront as we're unfortunately experiencing more and more of those types of events. So again, because a lot of times you have to be able to demonstrate when you go for a grant how it ties back to your plan. And if the plan even speaks to it just a little bit, it's enough to get a toehold to be able to go after the funding. So that was my.
Yeah, and then we can definitely look to see if there's additional ways that we can incorporate that as well.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions for Alex? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Okay, on council reports, Transportation Commission, Commissioner Brackey, please.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say again, thanks to John and to Brian for the presentation on transit. I've been looking forward to that presentation and really just encourage all of you to continue that dialogue with CDOT about the importance of transit, not only the busing service, but the Outrider, the Pegasus. I mean, there's a whole family of services. Transportation Commission had a great presentation on that last month. And just thinking very broadly about what are those different types of transit solutions and how could they dovetail with the work that is going on in Northern Colorado and the Northern Colorado transit planning. So I just think there's a lot of opportunity ahead with that, and I appreciate you coming up to share that with us. We have a pretty quiet meeting with the Transportation Commission this month, so it's just a one-day, half-day event, so not a lot there. And then, as I said last month, I don't know how long I will still be here. I said I must be on a month-to-month lease. I still don't know if my term will be extended or not. Hopefully so, but if not, again, I just want to take another opportunity to say thank you to all of you. It's truly been a pleasure and an honor to serve with everyone over these past 4 years, and I think we've accomplished a lot together. When I think about the 10-year plan, the greenhouse gas emission reduction rule, all of the work that's been done to advance North I-25, the mobility hub, segment 5, getting that funding pinned down and the delivery method. It's been a very busy 4 years, so I just want to say thank you for that, and it's been great serving, and we'll see what's next, and we'll go from there. But anyway, it's been a great ride, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brackett. CDOT Region 4 update, Heather, please.
Good evening. Couple things just wanted to update you guys on. We did finalize our TAP awards and our TAP call for projects. I don't believe I gave this summary last month, but we had over $44 million in requests in Region 4 with only $11.8 million to award. We had the most projects submitted of any region. We had 27 projects, which is a lot, and I could say all of them were very good. We awarded 10 of those projects and fully funded 7. So North Front Range received full funding for 2 projects, one in the city of Fort Collins and the other one in the town of Milliken. And, you know, we had a diverse scoring panel. We had representation from all of the TPRs. Commissioner James was the representation from the North Front Range. And not only did we consider the scoring criteria that was outlined, but we also really wanted to take into account the feasibility of their funding and their schedule. Did it make sense? Would our funding complete the projects and actually put something on the ground? And then we really wanted to make sure that each TPR got their #1 ranked project and that there was some equity across the region. So I can provide the total list of awards if that's desired, but as I noted, City of Fort Collins and the town of Milliken won for the North Front Range. The North Front Range did have 8 of those 27 applications, so I would anticipate in their next TAP, at your TAP call, you're going to get some good applications. From a project standpoint, just a few updates, a lot of progress. Since the rain has maybe slowed down a little bit on the I-25 corridor, if you've driven 34, the final pavement should be completed. It should be completed by July 8th, and then the permanent striping will go down the following week. There's a lot of concrete paving that's going on, you should see out there. And the rain has not actually slowed things down. The frontage road is open. Between, I'm just checking here, the frontage road is part of the segment 7 and 8 project. That bridge over the Hillsborough tributary is now open. And then segment 6 is doing well. 85% is complete with construction, and Larimer County Road 16 is on target to open July 11th. So if you drive the interstate, you can see that roundabout coming together really nicely. And segment 5 is well underway. I want to mention that the NOFO drop for the MPDG grants, which we're going to be chasing MEGA and Infra for the segment 5, and applications are due August 21st. And the other couple projects to note, 257, I'm sure Windsor and Severance is feeling this. There is a closure from July 5th to July 27th from Eastman Park to the roundabout. And then there'll be a full closure from Crossroads to US 34 for about 20 calendar days in September. So that is well underway. The diamond grind for north of Mulberry all the way up past Owl Canyon is out for advertisement, and we are expecting bids that advertised on June 15th. So we'll be opening bids, I believe, next week. And then we have advanced some of the corridor study, safety study on 287. We've identified some problem areas by location, analyzed the contributing factors to the crashes, and now prioritizing locations and some potential engineering fixes. Any questions for me?
I appreciate the heads up on that 257 deal. I got caught up in that on the way from Johnstown tonight. But yeah, the closures works.
Yes.
Thanks, Evan. All right, SAC report is written. Colorado Transportation Investment Office report is written. NATME, Commissioner Stevens, please.
NATME met on June 29th. Most of the meeting was devoted to going over open meetings training, CORA, conflict of interest, attorney-client privilege, executive session that has to be done once a year for state bodies. That was done by Kathy Young from the Attorney General's office. We did see that, we did find out that we took in more money than we had originally was forecasted. So there is, in this past fiscal year, we had taken in $7.9 million and had anticipated only $6.6 million. So hopefully soon we'll start looking at criteria and getting some of those dollars out the door.
Questions? Thank you. CDOT TPR boundary study, Commissioner Stevens, introduces that, please.
So we met yesterday. There will be a survey that goes out. It's a TPR boundary review survey that will go out likely to people who are, well, to all elected officials, whether they're part of a TPR, NPO or not, likely to staff members and transit authority folks, but probably not necessarily to the general public who, as somebody said in the meeting, it's pretty much insider baseball, so what the TPR boundaries aren't necessarily that interesting to the general public. And so look for that survey to come out because we want everybody to weigh in on the TPR boundaries. We also talked about the public meeting schedule. It looks like there'll be 5 regional meetings. In addition, it looks like there'll be in-person meetings with all the individual TPRs. Some TPRs have meetings on the books of when that's happening. I mean, for example, Upper Front Range doesn't, so that would be a special meeting. But they want to talk to all the TPRs in person to get feedback. And then they started looking at all the IGAs and the bylaws, MOUs that each TPR had in place, and there are definitely some, inconsistencies. So really trying to look at best practices for those IGAs and bylaws, to having some consistency and transparency. They did mention these rural planning assistant grants that had previously been used for a lot of folks to attend staff meetings when those were largely in person, and those dollars aren't necessarily being spent down. So could some of those dollars be used for creating websites for some of the TPRs that don't have websites and don't have some of their information as readily accessible as others do? So that was basically what we talked about. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Suzette.
I would say the one thing to add on to that is I think the plan is to get the survey out in coordination with the meetings, and I think that is scheduled for the end of the month and the beginning of next month.
Okay, additional,
John. So I've been in several meetings with Herman and read in a lot of the slides that the boundaries aren't going to change. I don't know what that means.
That hasn't been decided yet. So that is a possibility, I think. They just haven't been looked at for 30 years. So they may or may not change depending on the feedback, depending on, what's discovered during this process, but no decision's been made yet. And it's not, honestly, it's just a recommendation that will actually be brought to the TC in November, so.
Right, and I think the other part of that is in the legislation is that you need to look at all of these things like BMT and LAMA, all that stuff. They're just now at the stage of they've got the data at the county level, but it's not granular enough to look at between the TPRs. And I think that's the next step that they're working on. So they don't have data yet to support what makes sense for boundaries at this point, or even to make a recommendation, I think.
They have maps that generally show what's happening across the state with regard to things like BMT or commuting patterns or any of the, there's a lot of criteria that was mentioned. I think freight routes and things like that. So, but like as Suzette said, it's not broken up between TPRs.
It's at the county level at this point. So, as you can imagine, the Front Range looks like a big blob of them. And the rest of the state is less populated.
Instead, that comes up and we get a peak. How does what?
Well, yeah, I was going to say you should all be getting the survey.
The survey, the data.
Yeah, and I think that has been asked for to get some more in-depth look at what that data is. So, yeah, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to. The other thing I think CDOT is saying that they want to get in front of all of the groups that they can. So I think it would not be a bad idea to invite them back and talk about the data at some point.
Well, and they had talked about those in-person meetings with all the TPRs, and so some of those are really easy to schedule because they can naturally occur with the cadence of the meetings. Some of the meetings, because most TPRs or a lot of TPRs only meet quarterly, there might have to be special meetings, but we'll ask for that data to be presented during those meetings as well, because I think that's really important.
Okay. Yes.
I know another part of that work is looking at the representation, and I didn't know if one of the things I read was around the track representation, so the transit and rail advisory committee, or will the working group be looking at that? Because that's an area, we were talking about transit earlier, that seems to be a mystery around who participates in that and how does that group work? Did they address that in your?
Susanna, I think Susanna
I did
asked that question.
I know why I asked that question is because I think the boundary is only part of the discussion. I think the representation is, quite frankly, in my opinion, maybe a bigger piece of it, because it's staff representation and on the track. My understanding track is not, I'm looking at Jan, is not operating right now, they're not meeting.
We have not for a while.
Okay. Yeah.
If my main track is different than stack, it is not technically an advisory. We looked into that legislation for a while in depth when Amber Blake was still our director. We didn't really have it as an advisory body. So I think, with the representation at TPR level, we might need to reassess what track is. So definitely support that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I brought that, no movement on that version yet.
Well, thanks for asking.
Additional comments or questions, please? Okay, thank you. Front Range Passenger Rail District, American Architect.
Thanks. First, before we had our meeting on Friday, June 23rd, I wanted to go briefly over the North Corridor meeting we had. I think most of your municipalities, at least on the western side, were present, along with Barry Wilson from Windsor and Commissioner Brackey. And it was rather vague. We went over the polls, what the originally legislation proposed. One point in there I did want to bring up is kind of what we've been, we haven't had an official conversation about this, but the issue of equity and especially with Weld County side, what benefits are there. There wasn't really any concrete answers there. Wasn't necessarily reflected in the survey results either. I did learn, I don't think this is a conflict at all. I'm also the mayor of Berthoud also on this, but Berthoud will not be getting stopped too, and will be in a unique position where the rail will be going through our downtown, but not stopping, and will be taxed for it. I met with them on the 25th to talk about that issue, as well as brought up Weld again. No concrete answers on these. There's two conversations in the works, one being to delay if this passed, would be delaying taxation until there is a benefit, which still is difficult on a lot of our communities to find that benefit, or to have some kind of tiered program where the closer you are to the rail or the rail stop, the more you'd be taxed. Sounds rather good, but if you're in Loveland or Fort Collins, all those areas, you'll be taxed a lot more, so I don't know the feasibility of that. Finance committee has been discussing it. Obviously, numbers are rather vague right now. Legislation has some sales tax caps on there. There's property tax options. Longmont has floated an event fee. Any event, some portion would go to passenger rail. They want to bring this to the state legislature, and they'll be having a conversation on the Front Range Passenger Rail official meeting about this. So that's also things that might affect things like Greeley Stampede and stuff. And if that is split with CDOT and also RTD, as there's a lot of RTD representation on the rail district or people within RTD. And that's a big push of the legislation as well, as to work along with RTD. So the actual meeting on Friday, more or less, was short. It was kind of the retreat logistics. We joined the Colorado Retirement Association for our 2 employees. And our finance that I'm in, and Johnny's on the planning with me as well. We talked briefly about, they're already talking about amenities within the particular rail cars, what people want to see. I guess I'm looking for some guidance here, and maybe we need to bring this back at another meeting, have them in the room here. But I think them going back to the legislature, they're already talked to the governor's office. I've encouraged them to talk with CML. CML will be advancing some legislation on housing that's similar to SB 180, not 181, 213, that would allow a local preemption that 213 did not have. Those of you at the CML meeting on Monday, the governor spoke, and there was some obvious tension in the room, with the governor saying essentially the same thing that failed last session will be coming right back at you.
And if you don't like CML, you can work around them directly with us. My point being here, we're going back to the legislature already. It might be good to have a conversation on the benefits to wealth, and maybe start trying to advocate at least some concern here through maybe a letter from the chair about those concerns. And if we had him in the room here, we could tailor that meeting for that reason instead of them just kind of giving a broad overview of where they're at. I think, just in my opinion, it'd be good to kind of lead that conversation now going into the legislature versus kind of lag behind it. So at least it's on all their minds, and there might be a degree of motivation for them knowing that might not be a lot of support in the North in its current alignment. So that's where I'm at. I don't really know as far as advocating for the NPO where we're at now. So I'm kind of maintaining the current alignment and brought up privately my concerns with the rail district over and nothing further there. I guess I'm just requesting maybe that we could put the rail district back on another agenda if others feel inclined or open to that idea.
Anytime I get the opportunity to talk to Andy, it's a pleasing type of logos.
And I've had several conversations with Andy on that, and you've heard me bring it up.
You have, absolutely. I think we both do. So eyes are on that.
And there's been no pushback, but Andy and I have had several conversations in the smoky back room, just to tell him our concerns.
Yeah.
And he's working with the governor's office on how they proceed with that. If Weld County does come out of it, whether it's taxed or not, or incremental taxing, whatever it is, if it does come out, they got to go back to legislation and change the.
Right.
So that's got to be a whole.
I brought up too that I don't see this working in Berthoud if it's on the same alignment, and it might be good for them to have a discrete way out through the legislature versus it getting towards the end and we're advocating people not to go ahead with this. The other worry is that no matter what, if we weren't excluded from getting out of the district, it's bad on the district. There's votes against it, maybe more from the Weld side, that might tank the whole project. But the other thing you think about it might still go through and you won't be taxed for something that it'll be hard to see a direct benefit from. I think that boundary could be adjusted. Estes won't be paying anything, and I think Estes would see a big benefit from this with the Mustang coming from Longmont. Wellington also will be taxed and not seeing a benefit, even though they're not in an NPO because they're within 5 miles of the interstate. They'll be paying for it too. So I think there's some room there, and since we're going to the legislature already, it might be kind of have that conversation. Not saying necessarily recommending anything about Weld pulling out, that's on you guys, but maybe put some pressure on them if we look at some other ideas. I mean, you brought up I-25, they've replied that's 5 times the cost, but let's look into it at this point. Look it on the previous commission.
Let's talk.
I'm just going to ask, I thought when I was looking on the website, I think you guys are in the middle of a planning process to look at the alignments.
Yeah, it's how do I say this?
They're looking at it.
They're looking at options, but it's too expensive.
Right.
So we'll spend money.
Let's just be clear.
Than we already know. That's why it's so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's got Boulder in there. The whole thing for the speed is it has to dogleg over to Boulder. And a big part of this is RTD trying to replace the failed fast tracks program where Longmont was promised a rail and RTD never delivered on it. So now they're still being taxed for absolutely nothing. So part of the governor or the original intent with working with RTD and that dogleg there is to replace that failed program. So I don't know really with some of the commissioners, Boulder commissioners on there, if there is even any will for I-25. Like you said, I think it's kind of just being talked about, but I don't know if there's any serious looking into it. You brought up 85, and we're on the group with BNSF and UP, and UP is great to work with. BNSF doesn't even show up. I think there's plenty of other opportunities to look at this, but I was in the finance committee yesterday, and going to the legislature, they're saying we might not be ready for 2024. I didn't know this is already being thought of as somehow going to the ballot in 2024 in some form or another. So right now, their only talks are about tweaking and clarifications on the current legislation. Nothing about significantly changing.
And they're now supposed to be doing public meetings for that plan right now.
That's what the northern one was. It obviously hit a lot of our spam folders. You know, I sent out a link but way late that I could
Yeah,
find.
I set it up too, and it was like,
Yeah, and it was your typical kind of, here we are, we're not that far along. What do you think?
Robust stakeholder process?
Well, you know, a lot of the concerns were location, price, and working with transit districts, which we really don't have a regional transportation district. So some of that was kind of interesting to me, how that was pulled over in the northern segment. Maybe that was brought up, I just didn't hear it. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. I guess, I don't know if tonight I'm looking for, Johnny and I are looking for guidance, but I think maybe it'd be good to bring it back here and have a more tailored conversation on this.
I guess that was my question was around the public process, because thank you for letting us know about the public meeting or public, whatever it was, stakeholder meeting. It was really hard to find out about it. And if they are in the planning process, like, it feels like what I'm hearing is there's a lot of these decisions that are being narrowed down in a separate process than the parallel public process.
Right.
And the general public's gonna wanna weigh in on this as well, I would think, right? I mean, in terms of who's ultimately gonna ride, like, you wanna reach out to who's the customer? And so, I'm just curious, like, when does the actual, like, engagement with the general public take place? Because that wasn't clear in that meeting, it felt very.
I don't know if it's clear to us.
No, and I think a lot of these decisions might be siloed between staff, our limited staff and that group. I mean, I was just surprised to see Bertha suddenly off the map again, and I brought it up, and there was kind of a vague response on speed, and, oh, you'll still see a benefit, not that far to Loveland. My point was, if I'm going to Fort Collins, then I have to stop at Loveland, I'll just keep driving to Fort Collins.
Well, and I thought they had talked about at some point there would be like an express route that had limited stops through.
That was the original idea.
And then there would be stops like in the smaller communities along
the way. Yeah. So that was gone, and I brought that back up to the new staff, and they're like, oh, that's a good idea, and that was kind of concerning, like, well, I thought that was the original plan.
So like, how did it get thrown out, but it hasn't even?
Part of this might be the consultant, I don't know, maybe I'll bring that up the next meeting.
One of the things that I'm gonna have a conversation with Andy, and I've had a conversation with a couple other board members recently in the last couple of days, is HNTB is working for CDOT, that is managing our contract for the district. So Andy oversees it, but it's actually being managed by CDOT, and the contracts with us, the district, but we're not getting a lot of the information. We're getting, the committees aren't getting, the planning committee's not getting all the information. We're asking a lot of questions, just like we are tonight. This is basically our board meeting, which is true. This is what you're seeing at our board meeting right now. And it needs to become a little bit more clear where the consultant's working for the board, and we get to ask those questions, because your question, public, getting out in front of the public, has been asked at every meeting, I think.
Well, and I can say from my part, Chrissy Wright, the new employee underneath Andy, has been asking, how do can you get me in front of other people? Commissioner Stevens has reached out actually about me from Malheur County for a study session. The reality of getting them wanting feedback or them just kind of giving an update, I don't know where that's at, but you're right, Chrissy actually brought that up to me about the complications of CDOT.
Chrissy's working her tail off to try to get us in gear with Andy, but it's very limited staff.
Yeah.
So we're relying on other people.
So, like, I feel like there's a hidden they in there, and I don't know who the they is, because obviously somebody's running this. Is sort of behind the scenes that is not communicating with all of you. Is that who we should be addressing concerns to if we're going to be writing a letter from the NPO?
Address it to Will Stewart.
Yeah, David, thank you. Yeah, great point. I think that's part of Johnny's thing. We don't know running. I know who's running the strings. I think it's a group of people, but you're right. It's a CDOT thing. There's no concrete head on this. We're working off legislation dictated by a certain speed competitive with other ground transportation. So I would still direct a letter to Andy Carson, and maybe that's part of the letter too, is kind of a public process and who else is engaged in it.
I know Andy and Chrissy would come out anytime you asked them to come out, and they talk to you. But I don't know if they know any more than Will and I could give you, because the planning development process going on behind the scenes with HNTP is run by David Singer and CDOT.
Yeah.
They report to us once a month.
Governor's office has a role in this. They've met with him, and I think they've.
Lisa Coppin's heavily involved.
Yeah.
So maybe that's for invite a group or a panel or something to one of your meetings, one of these meetings, and be able to ask those questions.
I think that'd be the most beneficial because we're all, represented in different communities versus them kind of, honestly, pick us off one by one. It can be a group because everybody start a conversation with that.
Yeah, or have them co-host an event again for stakeholders or something where there's more conversation that can take place.
Right.
Because you're right, there's all these different components.
Yeah.
It feels confusing.
Well, I would say, by this legislation, one of the things I've learned is starting up a brand new government, basically. This is not assigned to any existing government. So it's basically its own quasi-government that you're starting up another state agency.
But I said 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's building that is Andy and Chrissy just going, we got lawyers and then we got all kinds of representation, but it's just not something that comes together really fast. And there's a lot of people are saying there's no way we're gonna make 24. We need to do this right, because if we go to the voters, we gotta make sure we go with a solid plan and know what we're doing, and we don't wanna go out and fail and then try to come back later and say, oh, we messed up. So there's a lot of this push for 24, and a lot of people saying, maybe we're going too fast. And so there's still that conflict. You've heard that conversation many times.
Yeah, I didn't know we were already going to the legislature, and so there was concern about, can we make this date? Andy was talking about at the committee yesterday, is it worth, we get to a point, is it worth saying we just can't do it this session? But I guess the reality hit me, it might be good for us to have a say in this as a norm.
If they're going,
yeah.
That's a good point.
I'd be pleased to have Andy or Chrissy or whomever come speak to one of our planning council meetings. That's be fine. But as you say, you don't know that they're going to give us any more than what you have been given.
Right. Would it be all right? I guess I could bring this up at the very end.
Andy, come up.
At the next one, because we're ahead of the legislature still by that point, but they're working on all this stuff right now. So the sooner the better, probably. Would that be all right with everyone? We could get that on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I like him to be here in person. Last time he was on. So it'd be nice to
It
have
sounds
him
like
here.
we need to have a couple people here,
Yeah.
frankly.
Well, yeah.
Get the days in the room.
We could get,
Both of them.
It's David Singer's managing HNTV.
so maybe David and HMTV and them, and if we get someone from the government, I don't know, wherever we could. I guess. Well,
And then I guess I would, so David Singer is one, and then.
I can email you all these, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
email, so David Singer,
Andy.
Andy Percy, and then somebody from the governor's office.
Or the HMTV art consultant, maybe not the governor's office, but.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Lisa's heavily involved with Andy, but I don't know, she doesn't come to our
So
meetings.
you just, you
Okay.
can email me.
I'll email you.
Email it.
Lisa with the government.
Lisa's in charge of their P3 program, and she's heavily involved in the front range passenger rail.
Okay.
She was his chief of staff, and she stepped back to do the P3 and run the North front range passenger, sort of be the lead on the front range passenger.
Okay.
And probably.
You'll get to her. I will. We'll be good. Okay. Thank you. Host council member report. Councilor Baker.
Okay, it's a tough act to follow, as all train talk. Yeah, well, welcome to the town of Severance. Let me talk about a few programs that are happening where MPO dollars are being used in Severance. Two of them are intersection improvements. We've had some fatalities and some horrific accidents. And so these two intersections will be getting lights and some widening to prevent that. One of them is, if you call out on Harmony and 18, that one is basically associated with State Highway 257. Truckers are coming up, they're avoiding the Windsor downtown.
Yes.
And they're driving up into Severance. Yes, you guys done a great job at blocking them.
Finally got that truck around.
But they're heading to Severance, and there's a tricky left turn, and people are getting nailed, T-bone. So the traffic light going in there. The other one is on State Highway 392 and County 23. That is our high school, Windsor High School is there. We have a lot of young drivers who are going to Windsor or to West Greeley where their homes are. And there's a risk factor of them getting plowed over, and we've had accidents there. So, okay, enough of the safety improvements. We're going to make that much better. On the good news, we have 2 projects on the Great Western Trail. We've done some paving, so people can travel without being on the road itself. It's excellent. We've had some safety improvements for crossings for the Great Western Trail, and that is part of the MPO's bike and ped interconnection route from Eaton all the way to Fort Collins or more. I mean, it interconnects the whole northern area. So, thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Bates?
Comment, yes. I had an EV failure on the way here. It's one of the rare times that I didn't check my range, but 2 level 3s up front is going to be incredible when you guys get that up and running.
Did you get your bill?
What?
Did you ride bill?
No, that's why I'm late. I had to stop at, I went back to Loveland and waited until the person cleared and then I could use it. I wanted to blame it on Charger, but it's actually my fault.
Did you still charge your out here?
What?
Your charger.
They're not up yet. I called ahead of time. But that's cool. It's great to go.
I was going to say, Frank, there's government money that range from the sky. So
They got free. I got one of my free Excel ones.
We got free Excel.
That's insane. Yeah, we had 50 grand for it. So there you go.
okay, anything else good to come before the meeting? Seeing none, any suggestions on agenda items, please get those to Suzette. We'll see you in August. Thank you.
Hey, we got out of here, there's still light outside. That's my goal.
That's not fair.
We're only 5 minutes behind on here, too.
You made it up.